That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Killers of the Flower Moon, the hotly anticipated 26th feature directed by Martin Scorsese, which premiered at the 2023 Cannes Film Festival out of competition, is being released courtesy of Apple TV Plus and Paramount on October 20th, 2023.
I know I've seen a Scorsese film.
Oh, yeah, several many.
I know I've seen Shutter Island. Mm-hmm. What else?
Well, I made you watch Goodfellas for the first time recently. I know
that took me 6 weeks to finish?
I don't know why. It's excellent.
It is a good movie.
Casino, I know you've seen.
Oh, I like Casino. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that was him, though. What else?
I don't know. There's Cape Fear. We recently rewatched Cape Fear.
With Mark Wahlberg?
That's Fear. Cape Fear is with Nick Nolte and De Niro and Juliette Lewis in her Oscar-nominated performance and Jessica Lange.
Well, Scorsese is like a prolific director.
Extremely, incredibly prolific, yeah.
This movie is based on a book which you read and we'll talk about.
By David Grann.
The IMDb premise says, members of the Osage tribe in the United States are murdered under mysterious circumstances in the 1920s, sparking a major FBI investigation involving J. Edgar Hoover. So this premise to me sounds like more what the book is like, because reading this, you would assume that it's about the FBI investigating these murders.
Correct.
And that's what the book is. Mm-hmm. This movie's not that. This movie is more focused on Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio. Mm-hmm. De Niro plays like this guy who's like the king of Osage County. It's not really explained what his role is, but he's been a part of this community forever.
He's a pillar.
And the Osage people really trust him, but he is fully exploiting these people in a horrific way.
Oh, he is incredibly devious.
I would say this is like a horror film.
You know, they always talk about how Nurse Ratched, Louise Fletcher in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is the worst villain of all time. Like, these two dimbulbs really...
It's like a black comedy horror film.
Yeah, basically.
With like a little bit of like a courtroom procedural tacked on at the end.
Yeah.
But so Robert De Niro is like the king of Osage County, and one day his nephew shows up from being enlisted in the armed services, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Mm-hmm. And very quickly we realize that the Osage people are unique because, like many tribes, were, displaced and given land that the white people didn't want. But the Osage people got lucky because their land was rich with oil.
Black gold.
So now they are balling out of control.
Like, per capita, we're the wealthiest people in the nation at the time.
So what does that mean? The vultures come. Uh-huh. And these vultures look like white folks. And so many white people work for them. But we also see that many white men come to Osage County with the goal of marrying an Osage woman, mm-hmm. because they want those damn head rights.
And head rights are what each member of the original tribe has allotted to them.
So all of the revenue they get from the oil is distributed amongst the tribe members. And for some reason, the film doesn't explain this, and I don't know if the book does, we can get into it, but it's not really explained why non-Osage people would ever have access to head rights.
I think they changed that eventually, but initially, no. I don't think they realized what a danger white people were.
So we learned very quickly that that's the goal. And that's what Robert De Niro wants for Leonardo DiCaprio. Like, yeah, you're coming here to work, but what you're really doing is to find and they often like to use like full-blood mm-hmm. Osage woman to marry. But Leonardo meets this woman named Mollie, played by
Lily Gladstone.
And immediately he's fond of her. This is before De Niro tells him you need to marry her. He really does seem to like her. But then De Niro goes, you need to marry her. And he's like, well, I think she'd be into it because she's fond of me. So very quickly they get married. And they seem to have a nice life. Like, they have kids. Mollie has diabetes, which is important to her story. But we see that De Niro and DiCaprio are out here just stealing and murdering these Osage people.
In all kinds of different ways, too.
And it's very violent. It's very upsetting.
And it's not just them. And that's what the book goes into it a little bit more. The focus is these two, the Burkharts. But there were a lot of unaccounted for murders.
And these murders, the film doesn't really show the magnitude of what happened. It does show in extreme violence what happened, but the numbers aren't there. And no one's questioning it. No investigations are being done, which is so strange to me that this tribe really trusted De Niro, and he doesn't really do anything to help them find who's doing it. But at the 2-hour mark, Jesse Plemons pops up
As Tom White.
from the Bureau of Investigations.
When in his infancy.
That's why they're not even calling it the FBI. He's saying I'm part of the Bureau of Investigations. But he's a member of the newly formed FBI. And he's there because at a point, Mollie goes to D.C. to ask for help. And this is not their first attempt at going.
She gets the ear of Calvin Coolidge, yeah.
So they send someone, and Jesse Plemons and his men come and do an investigation, and they determine that they charge DiCaprio and De Niro with being responsible for the murder of a couple of people.
Very limited.
A small portion of what they really did. And we see the trial. They are convicted, but of course justice is not served really, because we all know how this all ends. And then we get probably the best wrap-up scene in a movie I've ever seen, which we can talk about more, but it's basically like a 1920s true crime podcast that's basically explaining.
It's a radio show.
It's a radio show, but I mean, it's so clever, and it explains what happened to everyone in the end. But I mean, this story is so rich. It's so big. I didn't give my pull quote.
You didn't. You had so much to say. Give it.
Damn. What's your pull quote?
Although it feels too long, and despite some valid efforts, caters to the perspective of its disdainful real-life white villains, Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon is a masterful and exhausting saga, recounting a shocking and brutal conspiracy waged against the Osage Nation.
My pull quote, the best word I can use to describe Killers of the Flower Moon is exhausting.
Yeah.
It is, the subject matter is really difficult to sit with. The movie's 3 hours long. It's just really hard to watch people be victimized in this way. It almost felt like if you told me I had to watch the miniseries Roots over the course of 2 nights.
You could do it.
I would do it, but I would just be like, oh, this is just a lot. It's just a lot to witness.
It's draining.
It's just so draining, and I felt exhausted by the 2-hour mark.
And I've seen it twice now.
Yeah. But I think trying to tell these kind of stories in this amount of time is very difficult. And I think if you were told you have to do it, if you have to turn this book into a movie, I do think that this version that Scorsese came up with is a pretty good version.
I agree. Yeah, no, it's a very well done film.
Yeah. There are things I wanted that are not in this movie, but...
Same, and, I think the book is, as a piece of investigative journalism, much more comprehensive. But really, the slant of that book is the creation of the FBI as the entry point into this story. And I think that sometimes it feels like a little bit of a disservice to make this a black comedy.
Yes.
Even though I think DiCaprio... I like De Niro in this more than you did, but I think the two of them together, outside of the context of what's going on, are kind of comedic gold.
I think DiCaprio is doing A+ work, and if he gets an Oscar for this, I would say it's worth it.
He's doing
well deserved.
He's doing the kind of method type stuff as a Marlon, if Marlon Brando were trying to do Billy Bob Thornton in Sling Blade.
He's everywhere. At one moment he's making me laugh, and some moments I feel like he's such a sweet guy, and other moments I think he's a monster. And
ultimately that is what he is.
And then there are moments when he's acting sympathetic, and oh god, there's a scene which we'll get to where he's being interrogated that I think is that's what they should show during his portion of his nomination at the Oscars. It's so good. De Niro to me is kind of always the same in every he makes that face, and he has an interesting accent in this movie.
I feel like I have met someone that acts just like him and talks just like him. So I don't know. I thought there was something kind of eerie about him in this. Clearly,
I don't know. I think I don't know. He did a fine job, but I think that he's the same in a lot of movies.
And Lily Gladstone, I think, gives a fine performance, but I also think she's kind of limited by, dying.
Well, because the first half of the movie is her she has her guard up which we'll talk about, but these women seem very aware that these white men are there just for their money. So she's very guarded. We're told that these women or this community, they're very smart. They know what's up, so they don't like to talk a lot. So she doesn't have a lot to do. She's very flat until she gets really sick, and then she's just dead to the bed for the other half of the movie. So, yeah, she did a fine job.
And I think maybe that's what we should get into next, I think, is what is missing is, try as it might, I think we get very few conversations from the Osage about why they're doing this. It opens with a ceremony where the elders are kind of bemoaning the fact that the generation sitting outside is going to be watered down by white folks. And
yeah,
I interpret these sisters, at least, that are marrying these white men that are all very unimpressive looking, but that it's a status symbol. These are the wealthiest people in the nation. And we should talk about how their funds are controlled, but to marry a white man is a sort of status symbol that's assimilation, but also their ultimate erasure.
Which this film does not explore. I wanted an exploration of why these women knowingly attach themselves to these men who are using them. And I suspect that because the filmmaker and the writer are not part of this community, they didn't want to be critical.
Sure.
Of these women's intentions, because maybe they don't fully make sense. Maybe, and they are partially responsible for their demise, that it felt awkward to show that because they are not a part of that community. And I think that's why this film leans heavily on the comedy and the two characters of DiCaprio and De Niro, which is fair. But yeah, I think I really wanted to see more of that. I actually was hoping that this would have been more of like we would have spent more time with Jesse Plemons and how the FBI is piecing together who's responsible. Because as the audience, we know right away that De Niro and DiCaprio are up to no good. So it's just a waiting game as to when they get caught.
I think we're left with some ambiguity until kind of the end, and where it's still ambiguous about how Ernest is really compartmentalizing what he's doing.
Ernest being DiCaprio.
At one point, he loves his wife and thinks he's protecting her, but it's like you cold-blooded, you murdered her sisters, or helped to in cold blood.
The tone of the comedy, it's definitely more heavy in the first half of the movie. So I'm just going to go through my notes. When DiCaprio shows up to his uncle's house, De Niro's house, they're having a conversation, and a really funny moment is De Niro's trying to size up DiCaprio, and at first, so he says, "Do you like women?" And at first I thought it was an odd question, but then it's like, oh, because your primary purpose for him is to marry one of these women. But then DiCaprio's character, Ernest, is supposed to be like a simpleton. He's kind of a dunce.
He's kind of...
And him explaining how he likes women, I thought was so funny. It kind of made him seem cute. And then when so his initial job is to be a driver. So he's kind of like an Uber driver or like a taxi driver. And when he first picks up Mollie, it's clear that he's kind of fond of her. And he's kind of honest about what his intentions are. Because she even says, like, you just want this money. And he's
calls him a coyote.
A coyote. And he's like, well, like, who doesn't like money? Like... So I can see like why he's charming.
Their courtship is sweet.
But then we see him robbing some Osage people. So we learn very quickly that he's rotten. I did want to mention that as I was talking about how the film's long, by the time, like, the film's so long that at the end when we start talking about other characters who were involved, and I had already forgotten who they were. Because we don't see them again, we just hear about them.
Sure.
And I know you don't have that problem because your memory, but for me, yeah, I had totally forgotten about these characters I met 123 minutes ago. Sure. Like, I just couldn't remember them.
I think it by the time Jesse Plemons shows up, and there's still like an hour left to go, and then there's a courtroom drama still to happen. It's like, whoa!
Mollie has a sister named Anna, and Anna is wild as hell. She's a drunk. She's like a corpulent woman who stomps around. She carries a gun. At one point, she threatens her, like, this man who he's not her husband, but he ends up killing her. Because the plan is to kill all of the sisters.
Ernest's brother
ends up killing Mollie's sister. Because De Niro's plan is Ernest is married to a full-blood woman, so a full-blood Osage woman, and he can have her head rights. So if we kill all of her siblings and her mother, she will inherit all of that. So when we kill Mollie, then we get all of their money.
Lizzie Q is the mother, played by Tantu Cardinal, who is, you should recognize, she's in a ton of stuff, including Dances with Wolves.
But like that sequence of like these people just being killed is crazy as hell. I almost feel like this could have been 2 2-hour movies. The first movie is a horror film about these murders and the mystery of like how we're going to figure out. And then the second movie could be like a courtroom procedural drama, because I was horrified for a lot of it. Like, it's just really difficult to sit with.
And I think the book instills that feeling even more so.
DiCaprio's character is supposed to secure someone to kill another Osage person, but he's not good at wheeling and dealing because he's kind of a moron. So the person he gets to do it, he promises them like a car.
Blackie.
He's basically like committing insurance fraud, and that guy ends up getting caught by the police, so he never kills the people he's supposed to. But
and it's not just anybody that he's trying to get them to kill. It's her sister, one of her sisters, and that white man. There's this other white man that has married 2 of the sisters.
yeah, there's another white guy in town who's kind of like doing what De Niro's
Minnie
doing.
and Rita, yeah.
But I brought that scene up because another funny moment is De Niro's upset that DiCaprio messed up the plan. So he takes him to like the Masonic temple and gives him an ass whooping. Like a literal paddle whooping.
A spanking.
A spanking. Yeah. It's so ridiculous. They keep calling Ernest handsome. Leonardo's character, no. He looks rough as hell. And they give him fake teeth that look like his teeth, whatever they do to his face, they must fill in his lower jaw with like cotton or something. Because he has like and then his teeth look horrible. They're not the worst you've ever seen, but the fact that they keep saying he's handsome, because I can think of 5 other male characters in the movie who are way better looking than him.
Really? I think there's
the fire starter or the explosion guy.
Oh, AC?
The guy who wants to kill his kids, or he does, like he says he's going to kill his kids.
Yeah, he looks like a Coppola, but sure. But what's available to them?
Even Ernest's brother's better looking than him.
Really?
I thought for them to call him handsome like 6 times, no. So, getting back to Mollie being diabetic, De Niro is so cold. He convinces her through Ernest that he has secured insulin for her. And we're told that only 5 people in the country have access to insulin. And now Mollie's one of them. But the doctors, the medical examiners, the sheriff, the damn person who sells you the caskets, everyone in that town is crooked. They're all trying to capitalize and extort and exploit the Osage people. And these doctors are in on it, and they are giving her insulin that's laced with this poison that's supposed to slowly kill her, which is how a lot of these Osage women are dying. They call it the slow death.
Wasting illness.
The wasting illness. So this poor lady Mollie is getting shots of insulin regularly that are laced with poison. I just thought that was like...
She's already sickly by the time she's pregnant with her 3rd child, but that's a good scene because De Niro is so mad to learn that she's pregnant again.
Oh, yeah, because then if that baby gets born, now that baby has rights. The other thing that I don't think this movie does well is I was not well oriented with how much time passes.
Yeah, it's years.
It's years, but you would think it's like months. Like I did not... If it weren't for the fact that she had children... and you see that there are children that are more than like a day old, I wouldn't have known that years had passed.
It also doesn't really establish that there was this method of making a lot of the Osage declared incompetent.
That's right.
Based on, like, if you're diabetic, which I think is why she was declared incompetent, or, alcohol addiction. Anything,
their money is restricted.
They have to have a guardian that they have to request the money through.
Who's white.
Always white.
And it's a big distinction if you're restricted or not restricted. And yeah, the film doesn't really...
You get snippets of that, but it's like all of these very kind of dark details get, I think, a little eclipsed by so much going on.
Man, De Niro, so his like best friend and neighbor is this Osage man named Henry. And we find out that Henry is melancholic. He suffers from depression. There's actually a really hard scene to sit through where he's at the doctor saying, like, I'm depressed and suicidal and I need help or I'm going to go get a gun and kill myself.
Then they said get more whiskey.
And they tell us that. I was like, well, just get a drink, girl. And that was so hard to watch.
Yeah.
And then what do we see? De Niro has taken a life insurance policy out on this man. It's just so upsetting.
But the life insurance dictates that the man has to live through the new year at least.
Right.
So he's pretending to help
Henry,
yeah,
so that he can live long enough so De Niro can cash in on his policy. And then there's a scene where De Niro tries to cash in and they won't pay him, and he goes like berserk. Oh God! Then the Osage people do try to get help. At first, they send a delegate, this white man who's married to an Osage woman, to D.C. And the minute he gets to D.C., he gets a note threatening him, and then some thugs violently kill him on the street.
I think the note's supposed to be a genuine warning. Actually.
It is. Yeah. Oh, it's a warning. Then Mollie hires a private investigator, and not only does that private investigator get killed for sniffing around, you know who kills him? Leonardo. We don't learn this till the end, that he has done more things than we already know. And that's when he seems like a real monster, which is really conflicting because then you think there's a final scene right before he gets life in prison where he gets to talk to Mollie one last time. And she asks him, what did you put in my insulin?
No, she goes, did you tell all your secrets?
Yes.
And he's like, yeah, I have a clean conscience.
Yeah,
She's
my
like,
conscience is clean.
What did you put in my insulin?
And when he tells her nothing and he's crying, and she looks at him like, boy, bye. And she literally gets up and walks out. Like, she knows. Because she gets proper medical care after the fact. And they're giving her insulin. And she's in tip-top shape.
She perks right up.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, clearly, you were poisoning me. But it's like, ugh, he's just such a monster. Then we have the damn KKK part of the mix. Like,
oh, yeah, because there's also in the background things that happened in Tulsa recently.
That's a really important scene because we get, like, the news was disseminated differently, so they would get like film that they could watch about the news, which is obviously very delayed. So we see some people part of the county watching the news story about the Tulsa massacre, which if people don't know was like a white supremacist terrorist attack against this affluent black community
that they called
Black Wall Street.
Well, they used the term Little Africa in the street in the film.
So we see that these people have seen it, and then we find out that Mollie, one of her sisters who's married to that other white man who's doing the same shit, that they need to be killed together so that all of their rights go to Leonardo and his wife. So they hire this man, the more handsome man, who's good with bombs.
AC.
And this fool, the scene where he blows up their house is like, oh my God, because it's like a major explosion that like blows out the windows in Leonardo's house, like 5 houses down. And then we hear members of the community yelling, it's Tulsa, it's Tulsa. And I kind of wish that the film would have spent more time sort of paralleling that, because it's obvious that this community was afraid that what happened in Tulsa was happening to them. But I feel like that's a big enough thing to parallel that it deserved a little bit more time.
Well, it's an interesting parallel because this white community is literally in bed with the indigenous community, which is not something that was allowed with black people. And also how the KKK is in town. The head banker is part of the KKK, and he even says to De Niro's character at one point, "You're making yourself too obvious."
Too obvious. But I think me saying about the parallel being greater is because, or the connection being greater is because I don't, and this goes back to us not seeing the women talking about why they married these white men. It would have been good to better understand like their fear level, because after the explosion, then you see all these Osage people packing up their shit and driving away.
Yeah, I think they're trying to relocate to Colorado Springs. They keep talking about.
Oh my God. So when the FBI show up at the 2-hour mark and like the block is hot, we see De Niro, like we get a montage of him killing off witnesses. He is cold-blooded. Then we see him approach DiCaprio clearly on the way out, like he's trying to get out of Dodge. And he tells DiCaprio, I need you to sign some paperwork to basically make sure the money stays in our family.
In case something happens to you.
And Ernest, DiCaprio, is dumb, but he's not that dumb. He's like, well, what would happen to me? And he seems apprehensive, but then this dummy signs the papers anyway. My favorite scene in this movie is when DiCaprio gets arrested and he's being interrogated, and it's Jesse Plemons with 2 other people.
Mm-hmm. Including Pat Healy, I think is one of those people.
And they have him in this hot-ass room under this light, and they won't let him sit down, and he hasn't slept for forever. And he looks delirious. Like he's been rode hard and put up wet. His body language is perfect. They literally break him down. And like the cherry on top is that there are flies in the room. So every once in a while you see DiCaprio like slapping flies off his face. I just think that is like top-notch acting.
Well, and the extended version of that scene is really good because then they bring in Blackie to confront, because about the car situation and trying to collect.
Because they asked
insurance
DiCaprio about that insurance fraud thing, and he's like, I don't know shit about it. And they're like, oh, really, girl? And then they pull in Blackie. And then DiCaprio has a one-on-one with him, and so that's the extended part. That was really good.
And then that's kind of where he ultimately crumbles and agrees to testify against his uncle.
Then the man who killed Henry,
John,
whose name is John, who's played by an actor I recognize. He has a great face. He gets arrested. And then when they arrest him, they ask him, like, are you ready to talk? And he tells these FBI people, get your pencils.
Well, after he learned, he's like, we have a friend of yours here that said that you were involved in this. He's like, what friend? And then
yeah, when he knows he's hemmed up, he tells those people, get your pencils, because I'm singing like a canary. Okay. A couple of things I didn't need for this, since this long-ass movie didn't give me some things I wanted. We get a lot of like flashbacks to things that already happened, but with a different perspective. That I didn't think I needed, like Anna.
The murder of Anna.
Like, didn't need that. Something else I didn't need, Brendan Fraser's in the movie playing De Niro's attorney.
Bellowing.
I thought he was poorly cast.
And John Lithgow as the DA.
I like John Lithgow. I thought he was distracting, because even when he came on screen, people were like, oh.
John.
But I like him better.
I do too.
And I don't dislike Brendan Fraser, but I thought his voice was kind of, I don't know. None of it worked for me.
It's very loud. I liked Tommy Schultz as Blackie.
Yes. Yep. But overall, this is a very well-made film. I like how it looks.
It was shot by Rodrigo Prieto, who also lends Barbie this year and worked with Scorsese before, and like Wolf of Wall Street. Brokeback Mountain is a big film in his filmography. But yeah, it looked great. Probably the best looking scene is De Niro is kind of raising with fire this farmhouse, and Lily Gladstone is kind of towards the end of what she can probably take physically and is out of it, and she's in the bedroom with DiCaprio.
And the flames in the window.
It looks like they're in hell.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good one.
That looked really good. It's the last score of the great Robbie Robertson, and I think the score is pretty eerie. And he died after the premiere of this film. So in this print I've seen, the film is dedicated to him. But
we have 30 seconds left. What would you give this film?
3.
I would give this film 3.5 out of 5. Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.